Hi, I'm Maggie Springer. I'm a general partner at Otter Capital based in New York. Delighted to get to connect with you all. It's my first time in Armenia, and I can tell already that I'll be back, hopefully many times. I want to give particular thanks to the exceptional team at the Observer Research Foundation and Dr. Samir Saram for organizing such an important dialogue. And thank you to all of you who are joining us today as we explore one of the most critical challenges of our time, the future of work, paycheck, protections, and purpose. As the global workforce undergoes profound transformations driven by rapid technological innovations and the rise of non-traditional employment, these changes bring both unprecedented opportunities and challenges. A few numbers to frame up today's conversation before I turn it over to the panelists. 47% of the workforce in OECD nations are engaged in jobs with a high risk of automation over the next 2 decades. This will reshape what work looks like. Over 55 million gig workers exist worldwide today, representing a seismic shift from long-term employment to more flexible yet insecure arrangements. Global youth unemployment remains persistently high, staying at 13% in 2023, making it one of the greatest barriers to future workforce stability. Meanwhile, nearly 2 billion people, approximately 60% of the world's adult labor force, work in the informal economy, often lacking social protections. And to round out, this survey suggests that up to 70% of employees are disengaged or unfulfilled in their work, emphasizing the challenge of aligning work with a sense of purpose. As we dive into this conversation today, we'll explore the delicate balance between income security, ensuring social protections, and fostering a sense of purpose in this evolving landscape. I will be leaving 15 minutes for questions or engagements from the audience at the end, so start thinking of questions. I look forward to hearing from our panel. Minister, let's start with you. Armenia has undergone significant economic and labor reforms. How is Armenia working to extend social protections to workers, especially in the gig economy and informal sectors? And what lessons can other nations take from Armenia?
Thank you very much for the question. And first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Samir Saran for cooperation and for having this wonderful Yerevan dialogue in Armenia. The Republic of Armenia during the recent years, in fact, is witnessing different kind of challenges, starting from the war, post-war situation, like the ethnic cleansing, social protection system. We prepared for addressing all of these challenges. And since we live in the 21st century, we are part of the interconnected world, so we have to address also other global challenges, the global challenges which are related to artificial intelligence, development of new technologies, and indeed all of these technologies would affect Armenia as well, the labor market, the economic condition, and the emergence of gig economy, like remote work, and many other aspects related to artificial intelligence and the labor market. In fact, it was signal for us that we have to act in accordance with the global transformations. Otherwise, we will create a lot of problems, not only in the social protection system, but also in other aspects of our social life. So to address all of these challenges, first of all, we decided to act holistically, to not focus only on one aspect, for example, gig economy, to not focus on providing like the social security safety nets for gig economy, like beneficiaries or just actors, players, or remote workers, but to start from the strategy. Strategy for the employment, strategy which will provide the ground for not only like 2 years, 3 years, but also for a decade, and to help the government have long-term policies. So now the Republic of Armenia, in cooperation with different research centers, with different partners, is in the process of forming a new strategy for employment, and all of these issues related to new technologies, gig economy, artificial intelligence, everything are incorporated into this new strategy. But so the strategy is the vision. We have to also change our legislations in order to have everything in accordance with the global demands. That's why last year we amended the labor code of Armenia and we changed 40% of the labor code, trying to make our policies and legislation in accordance with the global changes. For example, during the COVID, we understood that we need to have regulation for the remote work, but we didn't have legislation for that. So we changed the labor code in order to have everything, so the frameworks for that, and for example, to have also digital tools for having like employment agreements, etc. So, but still there are a lot of challenges that we have to address. For example, so the workers, for example, digital nomads, how they should make sure that living in Armenia, working in Armenia, they should have socially protected. What kind of social protection projects we offer? Everything so will be addressed in the strategy of employment that now we are working on, and we have target groups, and in that target group, so we should focus on different different processes. For example, one of the target groups is the young adults, who are not in education nor in employment, so-called net. What should we do? We have to provide successful, certified, like immediate upskilling and reskilling projects for them. And now, according to different reports, the skills is becoming more and more important than, for example, get education and then go into the labor market, etc. Now we have to, because it will take much time to spend on education for this targeted group. The second targeted group is even we can, for example, support them to get engaged into gig economy, like after having some short-term but very well-organized upskilling or reskilling trainings for them. Or the middle-aged women, 30 to 40 years old, that, again, we have to help them to make them an important part of our labor market. Despite we have some successful statistics, still we have to work hard in order to make them really important players of who should add like value and should play an important role for increasing the GDP. So we trying to address all of these issues holistically through the strategy, and from the strategy we will have new policies, new legislation, but we can't do it alone. We have to do in cooperation with the Ministry of Economy, with the Ministry of Territorial Administration and Infrastructure, and with the help of civil society and our international partners.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you brought up strategy. Dr. Oltamajani, I'd love to hear from you about the current state of work in Albania and the Balkans more broadly, and then if you can focus particularly on the strategy that's coming out of your office and solutions that you can share with the room.
Well, thank you for the question. Also, thank you for the invitation to this great conference. I would also like to thank Dr. Samir Saran for inviting me, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for having me here. I think it's the best and the worst of times to talk about the labor markets today. The best of times because we have a lot of technological developments which have increasingly affected the labor market in a meaningful and helpful way, but also the worst of time because we need to catch up with the fast pace of the technological development and make the necessary adaptations of the labor market and of the labor force to be able to make use of these huge technological challenges and opportunities at the same time. And I would like to actually cite Ursula von der Leyen, in her speech where she addressed the State of the Union, where she perfectly described the state of the labor markets today. That was back in September 2023, but we're still facing these challenges. And she said, and I quote, "Instead of millions of people looking for jobs, there are millions of jobs looking for people." So it couldn't have been said better. This is the reality nowadays, that we are facing with a lot of labor shortages, but also skills mismatches. So we probably have a huge pool of labor force that is actually not doing the jobs that they're supposed to do, or the new type of jobs that they are emerging because of several factors. And I would like to mention three of them. First, the demographic challenges. The demographic challenges are closely related to the aging of the population, which is something that is actually being faced also by countries that were supposed to be young countries, young populations like Albania, and the average age actually is increasing with the low birth of rates, which is also another problem that many countries and the whole world particularly is facing, and also how to make use of the actual workforce and how to activate the whole workforce in the labor market. And the third one has to do with immigration. Immigration is something that is very typical for the region of the Western Balkans. It has to do with the historical developments, being former communist countries. We faced a huge immigration wave in the 90s, and we are facing another second wave of immigration, and this is very closely related to the fact that the whole Europe and the whole world is actually facing labor shortages. And the problem with the second wave of immigration is because the middle class is living in order to fill in these job vacancies in more developed countries. So this is also closely related to the fact that countries like ours, smaller and with lower wages, need to catch up in terms of the wages so that we can keep the skilled labor force in the country. Given these three elements, it is important that we address them with the right policies in order to have the right strategic approach. The minister mentioned here a little bit the fact that and it's also typical for Albania that we have, and you also mentioned it, that we have a high rate of unemployment among the young people. In Albania, that's also a problem, and particularly young people who are neither in education nor employment and training, the NEET category. And what we're trying to do in this regard is to implement a successful project that comes actually from developed European countries, more developed European countries. Portugal is a good example of how they have tackled the unemployment among the young people through offering them two main pillars in this program, which is called the Youth Guarantee. So the first pillar actually focuses on the employment opportunities and matching them with the right job, either through the first pillar or the second one, which focuses on reskilling and upskilling the young population by actually training them, giving them vocational education so that they can actually join the labor market with the new skills that are required. And of course, with the digital skills, which is a very important element, as I said. Sometimes even me, I feel that I'm digitally incompetent in some cases, which means that we are lifelong learners, and throughout our life we need to invest in our education and in our training process so that we can keep up with all these technological developments. The second one, and which is closely related, and I talked a little bit about it, is the technological advancement and the digitalization, but how do we tackle this one specifically? COVID-19 gave us a great example on how flexible we are. So it is in human nature that we actually adapt to different situations and we adapt to new ways of learning. But, and again, the minister mentioned it, it's important that we have the legal framework in place in order to make sure that we also have the social protection that goes with the new different ways of working, such as remote working, or how to take advantage of the digital nomads. In Albania, we have a new law for digital nomads, where we actually have taken into consideration this new nature of work that has emerged and how we can make best use of activating in the labor market even those inactive groups that are not part of the labor market. And we have plenty of such groups. One of them is the long-term unemployed. So we have in place specific programs, training programs particularly, in order to attract them back to the labor market. We have women, for example, in rural areas, and we also have specific projects for them, particularly focusing in agriculture or in social care, so that they can also become part of the labor market. Other disadvantaged groups, like people with disabilities, or so the best we can do now is to get everyone on the labor market, because as I said, we have a lot of labor shortages. And the second problem to tackle, and I mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, is the skills mismatches. The skills mismatches are closely related to the fact that there are a few jobs, positions that are actually depleting, either because of the fast development of the technology or for several other reasons. So it is important to reskill and upskill the labor force and to give them chances in order to be more productive in the society. In terms of the immigration rates, as I mentioned, we're also having an innovative approach on how to make the best use of the trend. Of course, we live in democratic societies and it's very difficult to stop people from moving to new places, particularly where the wage gaps are significant, which is a big motivation for people to emigrate. We are experimenting with the idea of circular migration. So, for example, Albania is an economy that most recently has a very fast developing hospitality sector. We're a country of 2.4 million, and only last year we hosted around 10.4 million tourists. So this, in terms of the labor force, means that we have a high summer season. So basically these workers that are needed in the labor market are needed during the summertime, and this brings us to the new problem that what do they do the rest of the time, because the sector that is giving more and more the highest contribution in the economic growth is the sector that is characterized by seasonality. So you have to make sure that they have work all the year around. And one of the approaches in this regards, as I mentioned, is the circular migration, where we are having talks with other countries who have the peak of their season, of their touristic season during the winter time, so that we can create possibilities for the same workers who are trained to work in the hospitality sector to work for, let's say, 6 months in Albania, which is a country with a high summer season, and for the rest of the time to work in countries like Austria or Switzerland, who are famous for their ski resorts and the high peak season during the winter. So the best that we can do in this situation is really come up with innovative approaches, because as I said, the world is growing old, and we need long-term policies in order to tackle these problems. And it's very interesting, the World Economic Forum, they have this new initiative, and it's called the Longevity Economic Initiative, which basically, and they have some really good statistics, in fact. For example, by 2025, there will be 1.4 billion people who will be in the age of retirement. And by 2050, this is going to be around 2.4 billion. So it's going to be a huge number. And they estimate that the deficit in the pension scheme is going to go by 2050 to around 400 trillion US dollars. So this means that we won't only face the problem of the labor shortage anymore, but we will also face the problem of collapsing pension schemes because of the shrinking of the population and the aging of the population. So the sooner we think of ways on how to address these problems now, so I really like the logo of this conference that is shaping tomorrow today, because tomorrow is going to be really late. And especially when it comes to the labor force and an aging population and all these factors combined, it is very important that we actually take the right measures and the right initiatives now.
Deputy Minister Manjani, that was fantastic and terrifying. Francoise Jacob, would you like to talk about some of the work that you're doing with the United Nations around the decent work and social protection agenda? Perhaps something on the action-oriented side, and particularly focus on the workforce that's currently excluded from any sort of protection, and highlight the areas into which we should be investing so that we have a chance of tackling some of the issues raised by the ministers.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us at this time. So, at the UN, we look at the future of work agenda through the combined lens of decent work, social justice, and sustainable development. These are three very important sort of principles. We are trying to shape what we call the just transition, which is really finding solutions in the process of the economic transformation, the green transformation, finding solutions for the most vulnerable labor population. And as you may know, we have a core principle in Agenda 2030, in our Sustainable Development Goal. That principle is leaving no one behind. This means that in the context of the future of work, we are looking for solutions for people with disabilities, for refugees and migrants, for youth, as you mentioned, generally for people in the informal sectors, or for people inside a mega crisis, or people who have lost their livelihood in some emergencies. So I will share 5 points, 5 areas that we have a particular focus on. The first one is the type of job. So when we talk future of work, we think very much automation, digitalization, AI, etc. But there are many categories of work that will remain, for which we will need people. And these include, I will mention only 2 or 3, but these include the care economy. You mentioned the demographic changes. The demographic changes is a threat for the economy, but it's also a huge opportunity. There is a huge need now, not in the future, now, for a quick expansion of a formal care economy and the recognition of the care economy as a full labor employment sector. The second sector, which will remain key, is the food production, so the agricultural sector. Part of it will be automated, but for many years to come, we will still need people, and these people are in rural areas, and we need to make sure that they have access to decent livelihood and to decent social protection mechanism. And why I mention these 2 sectors is because we need to make sure that the young generations are also looking at these 2 sectors. We need to make sure that the kids of farmers in the rural areas look at how they can combine their interest for modernized work, sexy, smart, or digitalized work, and still stay in their rural area. And so how do we connect them to smart agriculture, for example? So the green jobs are, we know the green jobs have a very wide category of jobs, and this is also very, it has a huge potential. I think in the UN we calculated that over the next 10 years we can create 60 million jobs just in the green area, which is various waste management, food production, addressing the environmental challenges, etc. Why I say this is there is a risk that government focuses very much on the upper end scale of labor, of the labor sector where there is a potential for high productivity gains. But we need to make sure that we also plan for these other jobs, which in some of the markets, in my country, for example, we have a lot of tension on the care economy because no one wants to work in it. The second point is on social protection system. And here, you gave some global numbers, Maggie. Here is two more global numbers. Only 45% of people around the world have access to at least one form of social protection. And only 1/3 has access to a comprehensive package of social protection. So it means that 2/3 of the world still is in need of basic social protection system. So again, when we talk about future of the work, we still have to work on the basics. And that includes that there are now many experiments in different countries, both in developing countries and in developed countries, on new ways of protecting the non-standard employment and of really moving out of informal work. This requires also a new way of looking at revenue collections, balancing social protection mechanisms that are of public nature or of private natures, looking at universal basic income whenever relevant or possible, etc. So still a lot of work to do on social protection systems. The third area I will touch very briefly because the two previous speakers have spoken about it. This is about skills. As Minister said, I think we are probably looking more into skill requirements versus degree requirements. And very important, we have to work a lot more on behavioral skills because what we know is the typical traditional career path is not likely to exist anymore the way it is. So we're going to have atypical career path. And to manage that atypicality, it means we have to manage uncertainties, change. We have to manage possibly conflict better, conflict in the workplace. And so these are typically behavioral skills that in a traditional MBA you might not learn. And so this is really important. The second thing is the lifelong skills. And I think, Minister, you have mentioned that. This is key because we need to make sure that institutions to provide lifelong skills exist and are available. And that includes formal education institutions, but also non-formal education. So big area of focus in the UN, in our jargon, we call it Transforming Education Initiative. The fourth point is strengthening the social dialogue. So this is how we engage with social partners, typically employers, organizations, and trade unions. I get, and I'm sure my colleagues get the same thing, I get a lot of requests from both this type of organization about, well, what do? We want to become more green. We want to adopt better sustainable practice. What do? So what I have noticed in the past, let's say 6-7 years, is that there's a huge demand for knowledge from the social partners. And this is, again, an area where we can do a lot together between the UN, the government institutions, the academics. So really working with the social partners so that they're also ready to approach the future of work in a positive way. The fifth area, and that will be my last point, is on promoting new forms of businesses. They exist, this is like cooperatives. This is social entrepreneurs, a social enterprise. They exist, but they're still not mainstream. But these enterprises, the social enterprise, they are so important to keep the social fabric, the local fabric. They are so important to keep people in regions, and to sort of encourage people to be in different areas than just in the main 2-3 urban centers. So I really think that the higher level of the education sector also need to embrace these new forms of business and provide more knowledge, again, more information on how we can focus on the people and not just on let's say, on the return on investments. So I'll stop by, or I'll finish by saying that we have a global initiative at the United Nations, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. It's called the Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection. It's a very complex initiative. It involves all stakeholders. It looks at institutional capacity. It looks at people capabilities. It looks at resources. How do we raise the financing that is necessary for all what I have highlighted before? And it looks at knowledge production and knowledge management. It looks at coordination between the different economic sectors. And so this is being implemented now in some of the countries. And yes, this is what we hope to, how we try to address these different points. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francoise. Heng Chung Kim, professor, I'm thinking about some of the things the ministers said and that Francoise just raised, particularly around social fabric and the ways in which we have to collaborate, the ways in which we have to rethink worker protections. And something that we've touched on lightly but not dug into is the social isolationism that comes with a lot of remote work. I would love to hear your thoughts on those.
Thank you, Maggie. And thank you very much for having me, Armenian Foreign Ministry and ORF, for supporting my presence here in the first Yerevan Dialogue 2024. And then today I'm talking about the future of work. And my premise, I think that the future of work is closely related to the rise of the non-traditional employment forms like the freelancing and contract workers and mini job and temporary jobs, something like that. So I'd like to highlight what kind of aspect we need to think about when we are talking about the non-traditional, this kind of non-traditional employment forms. So let me point out the three aspects. Maggie already mentioned that something like isolation. But, I will talk it the last point. The first one is the non-traditional employment forms can lead to the constraint creation, collaboration, and leading to the limitation of the creativity or something like the lack of the improving the productivities. So non-traditional employment forms often offer individuals greater flexibility, as we all know, but this can limit the chances for collaboration. In traditional workplace, we come together face-to-face meeting with colleagues frequently facilitate the exchange of ideas, exchange of the new thoughts. And then this kind of, during these interactions, new ideas or new concepts emerge naturally. But in-person communications plays a critical role in sharing emotions and providing immediate feedback. While remote conferencing tools like the Zoom and many other facilities can be utilized, these setups fall short in replicating the natural and instantaneous interactions found in-person discussions. So consequently, those in non-traditional roles may not fully benefit from the creative synergies that arise from the collaborative context, negatively influencing the emergence of innovative ideas. So let me point out this point. And second is, we are talking about the social protection in many ways. That's rightly pointed out, but I want to highlight, emphasize the lack of legal protection as well. Yeah. So non-traditional workers frequently face dearths of legal protections, while full-time employees are safeguarded by numerous labor laws now, such as those governing working hours, minimum wages, and also paid leave. And the non-traditional workers often find themselves excluded from these protections. I had a chance to talk about these issues with the people from ILO, and I was very happy, to see that ILO is also emphasizing this kind of aspects as well. This can lead to a scenario where they are vulnerable to unfair treatment or discrimination, and they may lack the means to seek legal recourse in such cases. As more individuals enter the labor market in non-traditional roles, this situation could exacerbate existing social inequalities, highlighting the urgent need to reassess current labor laws and create new protective measures. And last point, social isolation, alienation of labor, I'm talking. Non-traditional workers are at a higher risk of experiencing social isolation due to their limited teamwork and communications with colleagues. This isolation can have adverse effect on their mental and emotional health, which ultimately impact job satisfaction and productivity. Social connections in the workplace are vital for providing emotional support, which is a key factor in job performance and satisfaction. As non-traditional employment lacks these social connections, individuals may experience feeling of disconnection, leading to decreased motivation and the potential feelings of anxiety or depressions. We have already experienced this kind of situations under the COVID-19 situation as well. And social isolation can lead to many significant issues. Beyond the mental and physical health problems, it can also drive individuals to develop a singular way of thinking, becoming ensnared in extreme thoughts. Today, we witness numerous problems and incidents stemming from isolated individuals. The setting of social media, where users encounter newsfeed curated by their own search history, contribute to the reinforcement of their existing belief while depriving them of the chance to consider alternative perspectives. Such functionalities of social media, coupled with the alienation of labor I'm talking, brought about by non-traditional employment, can render individuals even more vulnerable to extreme thinking. Let me close. Non-traditional employment forms can have a vital impact on workers in several ways, necessitating legal and social efforts to address these issues. There is a strong need to explore new paradigms that protect the rights of workers while also enhancing collaborative environment and fostering social connections. I think that the role of the government also should be redefined through this kind of changing landscape of the labor market. The alienation of labor, first described by Karl Marx, can be more vividly seen in non-traditional employment forms. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As a reminder to the audience, we'll be turning over to questions after Sarah Masweta. Sarah, South Africa has one of the highest rates of unemployment and inequality. Your organization and your research have done a ton of work around social dimension. Can you talk a little bit about how you're addressing systemic inequalities in the labor market and the innovative solutions that you found to be most effective?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for ORF and Samir for the invitation. And it is my first time in this beautiful country, and thanks very much for hosting us so graciously. Let me just maybe mention just two things before I answer your question specifically. I think, yes, it is a question about South Africa, but I think this is a session where we are talking about the rising global inequalities. And it is within countries, and there is indeed a need to focus on South Africa, but there is global inequalities between countries. And I think sometimes the obsession with just talking about inequalities within countries misses the global picture, and therefore does not hold those who need to be held accountable. Let me just also say that global inequalities are mediated and often supported by advancements in technologies. And of course, there are those who often argue for global technological determinism, i.e. that the future of work there's no future of work, the work is going to cease as we know it. And that is just an argument of wishing away labor. We know that labor is not going away, and as indicated elsewhere, there's new forms of labor that's rising or that's growing that we need to pay particular attention to. We also know that advancements in technology has a strong correlation with rising inequalities, unemployment, and various forms of insecurities. However, I think in the case of South Africa, I think the question that we need to ask is, what is the role of the state? And I will talk about that. What is the role of labor? But oftentimes, again, in these forums, we don't talk about what is the role of capital in addressing the very inequalities that capital promotes through technology. Let me talk about the role of the state in South Africa, and I'll talk about the role of labor and capital. Again, with the emphasis that we need to be focusing on inequalities within countries that are, in my country, are very racial in character, but also the geographical location. Those who find themselves out in the margins are often women. One word that I have not heard in these sessions until now, but they are also in the rural areas, and I think those are the nuances that we need to bring here. The role of the state in South Africa, for example, we have the minimum wage commission that advocates minimum wage, particularly in vulnerable sectors, and these are oftentimes sectors that are largely in the rural areas, agriculture, are also in sectors that are predominantly women. Women are finding themselves domestic work, right? But I think that also just showcases the role of the state in advocating for, dare I say, progressive policies. But if the state does not have the muscle and the power to implement and to hold those who need to be implementing these policies accountable, then these are lame duck policies. I think we've heard in this section around the role of the United Nations and particularly in relation to workers. However, if the ILO again does not have the power and the muscle to implement these policies, I think the case is in point in South Africa. And this is why the BRICS is important, as countries coming together and saying, for us, it is about reforming global governance in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in support of the UN ILO, right? The second thing is social protection, right? Again, the idea of universality, that income and work should be a right for everyone, especially when you consider the meanings that individuals and human beings attach to having work, to having income, and universal rights to income, but also universal rights to social protection. Health, in this case. In South Africa at the moment, there's a big debate about the national health insurance. Those who can afford private health, income inequalities, those who can afford private health are not usually, but at all times are full-time employed in South Africa, and those who can't access health care are in the informal economy, are in the so-called gig economy. Let me finish off this point by talking about the role of the state as in having to be proactive and protective in approach, in manner, and in implementation. The role of capital, of course, that's important, because if capital does as it pleases and we continue to ignore its role in creating and recreating inequalities, then we are fighting a losing battle. It is responsible in my mind, for ensuring that rights of everyone are protected. The role of labor, and I'll close on 3 points. First is that when we think about that, the argument about technological determinism, it assumes that power is not contested, and that power lies in those who have technology, and those who don't have technology or the means of technology are powerless. And this is where the labor movement and labor in general should indeed reject this argument of seeing technology or those who have technology as the only ones who have power, right? And so this logic firstly should be challenged. Two, I think it is important to assume symbolic power. I don't know if I'm in a safe space to be talking about these things here. Symbolic power, right? The right to organize, even in the gig economy. And it has been proven over and over again that even in the gig economy, you can indeed use the same technology to organize and therefore assume symbolic power. Uber drivers, I think there's Uber in this country. Thank goodness those Uber drivers can and should be organized, and therefore are arguing against the end of the labor thesis. And I think from South Africa's side, indeed there are inequalities and they are growing. I think that the solidarity that we have indeed forged with BRICS countries and expanding is assisting us in taking the discussion to a global stage instead of just South Africa. Thanks.
Panelists, that was all excellent. Thank all of you. Now, audience, are there questions? There are microphones floating about, so go ahead and stand up. Please state your name, your organization, and your nation, and dig right in.
So, hello, I'm Monila Tucci, I'm coming from Albania. My question related to Sarah's speech, what's the success level of the startups led by women in your country? And if this level of success is related to the level of reduction of unemployment in your country, Leslie? And what's your organizations are doing about this, or the UN or the government organizations?
Hi, my name's Charlotte Rose. I'm from North Star, based in Australia, clearly British. I want to thank all of you for your comments today. I thought it was an absolutely diverse, eclectic, but really important set of inputs to this conversation. My curiosity sits with something that a few of you touched upon, particularly yourself, Altamanjani, around the importance of immigration and how it is we're managing that internationally. We are seeing across the board a very strong rhetoric about how immigration is being handled. But as we've mentioned, mobility is absolutely key to how it is the future of work is moving forward. How do we manage that internationally? What do we need to be considering, and what can we do?
We'll take two more. Try and ask them as fast as possible, though, so we can maybe do another round.
Good evening. My name is Dinara Dishankulu. I'm from the Kyrgyz Republic, representing National Institute of Strategic Initiative under the presidential administration. So my question, I agree with what mentioned Olta regarding that not labor is looking for the jobs, but jobs is looking for the labor. We are now in a position when a lot of projects are going on in my country for construction and even clothing industry, and there is a lack of labor resources. And we found out that the people from another country started to work on this sector of economy. So government is making a huge effort in the social security and in increasing the salary for the medical people, for the school children, constructing kindergarten for the young women. But still, our high skill labor resources is looking for the So they immigrated. I mean, they are looking for the best proposal. Our research, I mean, we did some forecasting for the future, like 2030, 2050. Do you agree that in those, I mean, in 10 years, there will be a big struggle, let's say, big fighting for the high-skilled labor resources, or not?
Thank you. And will you hand the microphone to the gentleman who raised his hand? And then Sarah, we're going to start with you and work back.
Hi, Karangulu Dagan from San Francisco. So it's probably for all the place, since you mentioned about the digital nomad program. So I'm curious to know how that changed, especially the influx of tech workers. So Armenia, for example, has really benefited from, there are some spots, at least in Yerevan and Armenia, which is driving this particular benefits and tech influx. However, there is no formal program for visa, at least digital nomad. So I'm curious to know what's happening in Albania.
Super. Thank you so much. Sarah?
This is the only time where I'm not happy to be first, but let's go. I'm joking. Joking. Let me just. I have attended a number of dialogues organized by ORF, and I think that this has been the focus on the labor market has been just up for where we are now globally. So again, a big thank you. Women and startups, women role in the economy in South Africa. And this is not just a comment about South Africa, but we know for a fact from South Africa's side that the role of women in creating livelihoods, especially in times of economic crisis, is enormous. And in the case of South Africa, women have taken up that space. It tends, however, to be older women who are taking up the space of creating livelihoods in three spaces, and I'll tell you why older women. First is in agriculture. Young women want to be in the tech industry, and less so in agriculture, because agriculture is not seen as an in thing, a trendy thing to do. There are young women, though, who are still wanting to do agriculture as a form of a sustainable livelihood in time of precarity. Two, in informal economy, selling of goods in many ways, less so in manufacturing. As a third area where women have taken up, as they said, space in entrepreneurship, space in creating livelihoods. Most of these livelihoods, however, are survivalist in nature. They are not taking most of these women out of their predicament of income insecurity. Right? And therefore, more needs to be done to move some of these responses to inequalities, to unemployment and income insecurity. More needs to be done so that these become sustainable responses to income, as I said, without the role of the state, without the role of capital, especially where capital, as I want to say, hogs the value chain. It is only those who are not SMMEs, so small, medium, and micro enterprises where women are engaged in, are not part of the value chain. And that hogging of the value chain limits the type of responses that women, but also men, also in responding and having viable responses to income insecurity, to unemployment, and therefore inequalities in South Africa. Again, I don't want to belabor the point. Those value chains are heavily networked based on alliances of social capital that are about income, but also about race and locality. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let me just brief something about talking about the immigration. I don't think that immigration refugee can be manageable. now we have more factors, to increase the refugee and immigration because of not only the political instability and the war, famine, but also we have climate refugees as well. So climate refugees is getting more increased. So yes, I know that the European Parliament and European Commission now initiate the new law on the asylum and then immigration, but the thing is that the level of the people immigration can be increased. So it's really, really difficult to manage. So, and I think that the international organizations like the United Nations have very important organizations related to the refugee, but something slightly different. So I think that we need to raise the more initiatives and then funding to speedy assistance to the refugees and immigrations in the future. So we need to have a more powerful and then bigger international organizations to deal with the support and assist them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Francoise.
Thank you. Quite a few good questions. Let me just talk briefly about the gender aspect, the women aspect. One thing I didn't say is the studies show that in the increased automations, women are more at risk of losing the job. So number one. Number two, as Sarah I think mentioned, in the care and agricultural economy, which are often informal sectors, again, it's primarily women that are at risk. So one thing we have really to watch is the risk that we have to lose the gains that women made in economic empowerment in the past 30 years. This is a really important indicator. How we can do that? When it comes to encouraging women entrepreneurship, I think now there are, in many countries there are programs available. The education system, higher education system is really, there are women there in the technical sectors, engineering, in everything, they're there. I think we still need to focus very much on the financing institutions. There might still be some resistance to finance women entrepreneurship. So, and there is enough data available that shows that women are actually usually very reliable borrowers. And I think this including in South Africa, I imagine. The other thing is, what I've seen, including here in Armenia, is in times of crisis, women usually show a very great level of flexibility when it comes to changing their economic activities, setting up new initiatives, really being extremely creative. And we are working on this here with the refugees that came from Nagorno-Karabakh. And it's been really uplifting to see some of the startups, literally, including in very basic sectors like food sector or and around the country, that these are women that have taken this up with a little bit of financial incentive from either the United Nations or different partners. And another point that we should really watch is how we can support women-headed companies in the whole supply chain. This is something that we are looking at is, just like we are trying to support virtuous companies that are paying attention to the green agenda, we should really also encourage in our own mechanisms, and that can be throughout the global supply chain. We should really encourage companies that are either women-headed or that are following sustainable principles.
I hate to do it. I would love to listen to so much more from you, but I need to cut you off so that I can give Olta and the minister the last words.
So I guess the message is clear. I'm going to start from the last question regarding the law on the digital nomads. So the answer is fiscal incentives. We have another law that is closely related to the law on digital nomads, which is the law on the creation of the technological parks and the free economic zones, where we give fiscal incentives to all the digital nomads that actually want to set up base in Albania. And we have gone so far in giving these fiscal incentives that we also touched upon the social protection scheme, where we are allowing them to pay social contributions towards the Albanian scheme only on the minimum wage, because supposedly they are paid a lot, and supposedly if we don't have an agreement with the place of origin where they are coming from, which counts towards counting these years of contributions towards the scheme, then they won't be able to benefit from them by the time that they retire. So this is, in short, the answer to the question, and I think the other panelists already addressed most of the concerns raised by the other two questions. I would just like to mention something really briefly when it comes to taking attention of the immigration and of migration in general, because we have emigration, but we also have immigration. I think there is no silver bullet to treat the problem, and it's true that there are benefits in terms of all the labor mobility that is currently happening. What we should be mindful of is, as I said, trying to reskill and upskill them, and we have a lot of subsidy programs for the government that are specifically targeting the immigrants coming in the country. And we're also setting up a new initiative now that is called the National Training Fund, where actually we are requiring the private sector to contribute towards financing the schemes of reskilling and training the employees. And of course, part of this financing will also go towards integrating in the labor market also the immigrants or the returnees. Statistically speaking, in Albania, 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 immigrants at some point does come back in the country, and it's really important that in order to reintegrate them back in the labor force, that they get trained, and having the private sector on board is really important so that we diversify the financing mechanism.
Agreed. That was great. Minister McCartchian, your home, your last word.
Thank you. So I just told Olga that we have a lot of similarities because we share a lot of common patterns. So regarding the legislation, it's very important, but in case of Armenia, for the digital nomads of the gig economy, despite we do not have now the legislation, we are working on it. But you know, I think it's very important to have like environment ecosystem. Like 40% of ICT employees in Armenia are women. This is sometimes it's higher than of some of European countries, and this is because we could manage to create ecosystem environment, and we have such institutions like TUMO, like Armat labs in almost all schools. When the school children they have an opportunity to get free of charge education, they are getting acquainted with like programming, engineering, etc. And then when they are deciding to choose their career, they already know about all the beauty of technologies. So according to LinkedIn 2023 Emerging Jobs Report, so the demand for AI specialists increased by 74%. So it means that national governments, they should do a lot of projects in order to attract and to create such kind of specialists through the upskilling and reskilling projects. And migration is one of the tools. All the governments, they want to have high productive, high skilled workers. So they have to work on, we have to work on to creating like the pool of high skilled workers in order to satisfy not only our demands, but also to satisfy the demands of other nations. And among them, we play crucial importance to women, to empower women economically. And our government had a chance to present during CSW in UN a lot of pilots, which is recognized by UN Women, very successfully implemented projects applicable to other nations as well. So now we are discussing to implement these projects in a large scale after having adopted all the strategies. And what we are doing, we are aligning the strategies together, like the strategy of demography, because we were talking about migration. It's a part of demography, and migration is also part of our employment strategy. So to address all of these issues, we have to align all of the strategies and the policies in order to have results.
Great, great way to wrap. There's obviously so much more that we could discuss. I look forward to connecting with you individually. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for their thoughtful insights. Thank you to the audience for your great questions. Thank you, Samir. You had lots of things before.